Today we're looking at lesson 3.5 where we are graphing linear equations. So we're going to continue that theme of graphing linear equations. But today, equations that are in slope-intercept form. Now, if you're looking at your doodle notes, you can see up in the left-hand corner, it says the slope is. Here's what I want you to fill in that little corner. I want you to fill in that the slope is the rate of change, okay? And then I want you to fill in m equals rise over run, okay? So you don't want to write super huge in that corner, but the slope is the rate of change, which is m equals rise over run. Now, I've given you a little bit more information on the board, and if you want to put that in your notes, you can. All right, doodle notes are going to be a little bit different because some of it I'm going to leave up to you, whether or not you want to add the extra information. But when we're talking about rise over run, if we're on a coordinate plane, the rise is my up or down motion, the run is my left or right, okay? But for sure, in that top corner where it says the slope is, I want you to have filled in the rate of change, and then in parentheses, m equals rise over run, because that's going to be very important when we go to graph these in just a little bit, okay? Then you'll notice right underneath or right to the left of slope-intercept form, it tells you what it is. It's a formula for the equation of a line that uses its slope and its y-intercept. So fill in those blanks, okay? It says a formula for the equation of a line using its slope and its y-intercept. I mean, it's in the name, slope-intercept. But you do have to know which intercept we're talking about, and we're talking about the y-intercept. So if you go to the top right corner of your notes, it says a y-intercept is. Okay, a y-intercept is. And we talked about this a minute ago. It's the point where the line crosses the y-axis. So in the top right corner of your doodle notes, you're going to fill in the point where the line crosses the y-axis. It's super, super important that you know the intercept in this formula is the y-intercept. Now, let's actually look at the formula, all right? It's nice and big up for you. It says y equals mx plus b. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to look at the y and the x, okay? And what they did on these, if you look up here at the front, they actually went inside of the y, there's space inside and inside the x, and they wrote variable. Because y and x are not going to change. They're your variables in your problem. They will never have numbers in place of them, okay? Y and x are going to remain y and x, which leaves us with the m and the b. The m and the b, one of them is the slope and one of them is the y-intercept because this is slope-intercept form. Does anyone know what the m represents? What does the m represent in y equals mx plus b? Is it the slope or is it the y-intercept? You've only got two choices. That is your slope. So right above it, in that box, I want you to write slope. I also want you to write and highlight or use colored pencils to make the formula for slope stick out. Okay? So if you write slope really big in that box, that's fine. Right outside the box, I want you to put the formula. Okay? If you're writing slope smaller, you can put the formula in the box with the word slope. But that slope formula is going to be very, very important. You have to know it. So once you write it down, make it stick out. Use colored pencils, highlight it, do something because the slope formula is really, really important. Now, does anybody notice something weird about my slope formula than maybe what you've seen in the past? Elijah?
You're like subtracting on in the fraction?
Well, no, that's the slope formula. Y minus y over x minus x. But did anyone ever teach you m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1? Have you ever seen that before? Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, there's nothing wrong with including that if you've learned it that way, but I don't like to include that only because I feel like it's more for you to have to remember. Here's what is important to understand though. When you are doing the slope formula, the first y you choose, you have to choose the x from its ordered pair, okay? So it doesn't matter. You can do y minus y in whatever order you want, But when you go to do x minus x, the same ordered pair has to be, you have to start with the same ordered pair. Okay? And right now, if you're like me, you are like, I don't understand what you're saying. You will when we actually get to a problem. Okay? But I just wanted to throw that out there because I know some of you have learned it, y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1, and I don't include that in my formula. Okay? Now, this is extra information. Once again, you don't have to put this on there, but you can if you want to. There are 4 types of slopes. There are positive slopes, negative slopes, zero slopes, and undefined slopes. Now, let's talk about zero and undefined because you actually learned this yesterday. What type of line has a slope of 0? Horizontal line. Remember yesterday we learned HOI, and the O in the middle was actually a 0 because horizontal lines have a slope of 0. So awesome. Which means my undefined, what type of lines have an undefined slope? That was vux, or vertical. All right, you remember that? The U in the middle was undefined. So really, let's look at positive and negative. When I look at a line on a graph, I'm looking at it from left to right. If the line is rising from left to right, what kind of a slope do you think it has? If you look at a line from left to right and it's going up, what do you think it has? Positive slope. Okay? If a different line, not the same line, if a different line as you move from left to right actually falls, what kind of slope do you think it has? Negative. All right? So some slopes are positive, some are negative, some are 0, and some are undefined. Now we've got the B in the formula. We've got the B in the formula. If N represents the slope, what does the B represent? The y-intercept. So that's exactly what you're going to fill in the box above the B. Okay? It's the y-intercept. Please don't just put intercept. Because again, yesterday we learned there's an x-intercept and there's a y. In this formula, we will always be talking about the y-intercept. Now that leads me to graphing a linear equation. If you look to the bottom right of your doodle notes, they have given us the steps for graphing, okay? And all we have to do is fill in those blanks. So look at my notes because up on the screen, I've given you the same wording as the doodle notes. So we got to fill in the blank. It says we start by placing a point at the what?
Y.
The y-intercept. So you fill in your box with the word y-intercept. That is where we start our graphs. Remember, we're trying to find quicker ways to graph lines so that we are not having to create an X and a Y chart every time. Will an X and a Y chart work every time? Yes, absolutely. But if we can avoid taking all that time, that's what we want to do. So if a problem is in slope-intercept form, we would start by placing a point at the y-intercept. Step number 2. From that point, we count out the what? The slope to find the next, and I want you to insert the number 2. All right? We're going to find 2 more points. But from the point, we're going to count out the slope to find the next 2 points. But it says, be careful about. Do you see that? It says, be careful about, and then there's this awesome little arrow. Here's what we have to be careful about. Positive and negative directions. If my slope has a positive rise, I'm going to move up. But if my slope has a negative rise, I got to move down. Okay, so we've just got to pay attention to the positive and the negative directions. And we'll get to all that in just a few minutes. And then step number 3. What are we going to do for step number 3? What's the first word in my notes? Connect. Connect the 3 points to form a line. And you're going to have to change 2 to 3. But we connect the 3 points to form a line. So it's 3 steps. We plot or we graph the y-intercept. From the y-intercept, we follow the slope. We do exactly what it tells us. We rise and we run, and then we connect the points. What has to go on the end of our line? Arrows. Don't forget the arrows, okay? That's what lets us know the line goes off in both directions. Now, let's practice these steps. Step number 1, it says start by placing a point at the y-intercept. Now look at the equation that you're given. Let's identify, what does the -3 represent in this formula? It's our slope. But we have to be careful because we're supposed to rise and run in a minute, right? The slope is a rise over a run. So we have the whole number -3. How do we make that a fraction? How do you make a whole number a fraction? You put it over an understood 1. Okay, so go ahead and add that to your notes because anytime your slope is a whole number, you, for the sake of graphing, are going to have to make it a fraction. All right, what does the 2 represent? That's your y-intercept. Okay, that's your y-intercept. And if you're interested in abbreviating intercept, INT will suffice. Okay, now, first thing you're supposed to do is you're supposed to plot that y-intercept. So if I'm on the graph, what direction am I going to go to plot a y-intercept of 2? Up to 2 on the x-axis. Now, we've been doing this and we're going to continue to do this. We're going to label the point. What are the coordinates of this point?
0, 2.
0, 2. So let's go ahead and label that. Awesome. Now, step number 2 says from that point, so from that point that we just graphed, we're going to count out the slope. So we are going to look at the problem and we are going to rise and then we are going to run according to our slope. Now, this is where we have to be careful about directions. This is a rise of -3. Is that an upward movement on the coordinate plane or a downward movement? Down. So we're going to go down 3 spaces, no points until you've made both moves. So we go down 1, 2, 3, which puts us right here. But our run is a +1. Is that to the right or to the left?
To the right.
Right is a positive move on the coordinate plane. So we go down 3 and we go right 1 space and there is our next point. What are the coordinates of that point? 1, -1. Good. Now we're going to do the same thing one more time because we want 3 points. So again, the rise is -3, so we're going what direction? We're going down 3, which puts me here, but no point until I run 1. What direction am I running?
Right.
To the right, 1. And what are the coordinates of that point? 2, +2, -4. Awesome. Now, the only thing left is step 3, where we are supposed to connect the points and draw our line. So we're going to connect the points. Remember, our line needs to go through the points so that we have space to add our arrows. If you go to the back of your doodle notes, before we start to practice, let's go over to the column, go to the far right where it says special cases. All right? What happens when you look at an equation like y equals 2x? What do you notice is missing from the formula? The y-intercept. So right above in that circle, right above y equals 2x, I want you to write down there's no y-intercept. That's what you're recognizing. There is no y-intercept in this problem. Now, technically, there is an invisible +0. So, if there's no, or there appears to be no y-intercept, where are we going to start this problem? That's what we need to know. That's what makes it special. We have to start by graphing the y-intercept, but it appears that there is no y-intercept in this problem. So where would our graph start? 0, 0, which is called the origin. So underneath y equals 2x, this is what I would write. The starting point, or the y-intercept, whichever one you think will help you understand better. The y-intercept will be at 0, 0. The y-intercept will be at 0, 0. Now, what about when y equals 4? What do you notice is missing from our formula when we have y equals 4? There's no slope. So above that, go ahead and write no slope. So what happens when there's no slope? Well, you learned this yesterday. You're looking at y equals 4, which means you're looking, if you were to graph this, you would be graphing what kind of a line? A horizontal line. Hoi. Remember hoi? H-O, which is actually a 0 and a y, right? When y equals a number, it's a horizontal line. And horizontal lines have a slope of what? 0. So again, there is an invisible 0x here. If you wanted to write that down, you could. There is an invisible 0x, but that just means a horizontal line with a slope of 0. So that's what I would write below y equals 4. It's a horizontal line with a slope of 0. Now, look where it says extra work. And we're gonna look at a problem like this in a minute, but let's just make a few notes. What do you notice about 3y plus 5 equals 6x?
X and Y are on the same.
So it's not in what form? But we're not doing standard form today. What form is it not in?
Slope-Intercept.
It's not in slope-intercept form, okay? So above 3y plus 5 equals 6, I want you to write not in slope-intercept form. Because in order to work these problems today, the equation has to be in slope-intercept form. So this one is not in slope-intercept form, which means we're going to have to do what before we start the problem? What's going to get it in slope-intercept form? Solving for which variable? Y. Okay? So underneath that equation, I would write, we must isolate y first. Or I must isolate y first. All right? If we recognize that it is not in slope-intercept form, we're going to have to start by solving for y. We're going to have to start by solving for y. Now, let's look at the first problem. They want us to write the equation for each line, and they're telling us to write it in slope-intercept form. So let's go ahead and write down the formula for slope-intercept form. What is it? If you're not sure, flip to the front of your doodle notes. It's real big for you. What is the slope-intercept form of a line? Everybody should be telling me.
Y equals mx plus b.
Awesome. So let's write it. We can write right on top of the graph. Y equals mx plus b. Okay? Now, if we're going to write the equation of a line, why not follow the steps that we would when we're graphing a line? What's the first thing we're supposed to do if we were graphing a line? No, look back at the front of your doodle notes. Steps for graphing at the bottom right. What was the first thing we did when we were graphing? We had to plot the y-intercept. So why not go to our line and find the y-intercept? They plotted the y-intercept first, so we're going to go find it first. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a point that they gave us. Where does our line cross the y-axis? I hear different answers. At -1, at right here. At -1. So if we were to label this point, it would be 0, -1. And if we were to fill in our y-intercept, what would we fill in? -1. So let's go ahead and do that. We can also go ahead and bring down y equals, and we can bring down the x because we know they're not changing. They're variables in our problem. So the only thing left for us to find then would be the what? The m, which is the slope, okay? We want to find the m or the slope. So here's how we do it. Without having to use the formula. We're looking at a graph. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to connect 2 points. It can be the top point that they gave us and the bottom point they gave us, or we can start with the top point and we can connect it to the y-intercept that we found. Okay? Or we can start with the y-intercept and connect it to the bottom point. It does not matter, but we have to rise and run to connect 2 of our points. So Kiana, which point would you like to start with?
Which one's the 2?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. No, it doesn't matter. You can do any of the 3 that are on there now.
The bottom.
All right, we're going to start with the bottom one. And which point would you like to connect to? All right, so the y-intercept. So she wants to connect from the bottom point that they gave us to the y-intercept. So here's what we do. We start by rising. We either rise up or we go down, but we got to get lined up with that second point. So, Kiana, and this would be a great time to use some colored pencils. If I want to get lined up with this point, am I going to move up or down? I'm going to move up. So I move up, and how many spaces did I move up? So I'm going to put a 1. Now, I went up. Is that +1 or -1? Positive. Then I have to run. Kiana, what direction am I going to move so that I connect with that point? To the left. And how many spaces did I move? How many? 3. Now, I went left. Is that a positive direction or a negative direction?
Negative.
That is negative. So that is actually a negative 3. Now, the only thing left for me to do is write down my rise over my run. What number represents my rise? 1. And what number represents my run? Negative 3. So your final answer is y equals 1 over negative 3, x minus 1. So we followed those steps for graphing. It's just we had to find the y-intercept and we had to find the rise over the run. All right? All right, we know the formula for slope-intercept is what? All right, so y equals mx plus b. We've got to find the m and we got to find the b. Which one do we find first? B. And what did you guys find it was? This time they plotted the y-intercept for us, okay? So what was the b that we plugged in? Negative 3. Awesome. We know we can already bring down the y equals and the x because y and x are staying variables. Now, let's connect the 2 points they gave us. I'm assuming that's what you guys did. So Noah, did you guys start at the top point or the bottom point? The top, okay. So did you go up or did you go down first? You started at the bottom? Okay. Did you go up or down first? We went up, or you went up, okay. How many spaces up did you go? 6. Very good. And since it's up, that is positive 6, right? Then you went what direction? How many spaces? And you went right, which is positive or negative? Positive. Great. So your rise over your run was what? 6 over 1, which when we put it in the box for the final answer, y equals, do we need it over 1? Or can we just put y equals negative 6, sorry, y equals 6x minus 3 would be fine. All right, great job. How many of you got, by show of hands, how many of you got y equals 6x minus 3? All right, great. Now, go to the next set of problems. This wants us to graph each line. We've already done one of these, so we should be able to fly through these pretty quickly. What are we supposed to graph first? The y-intercept. And what is the y-intercept in our problem? Okay, this is our b. And what's our slope this time? All right, there is an understood 1 right there. Very good. So our m is 1 or negative 1, which if we have to write it as a fraction would be negative 1 over positive 1. All right, so there's some good information. That's our slope. It's negative 1. We got to put it over 1. All right, so we graph from the center. We go where to graph our y-intercept? Up to 4. And what would be the coordinates of that point? 0, 4. Very good. All right, and then if we're going to follow the slope, we're going where first? Down 1 spot and right 1 spot. Remember, don't plot a point until you've made both moves. What are the coordinates of that point? 1, 3. All right, and do it one more time. So from that point, we're going to go down 1 and right 1. What are the coordinates of that point? 2, 2. And the only thing left is for us to do what? Connect them. Don't forget the arrows on the end, okay? Those are very, very important. All right, if you have not already, you can go ahead and begin to do the second one. Let's go ahead. Question. With the function or the equation the way it is, are we able to pull out the slope and the y-intercept right now? Is it in the right form for us to graph the way we've been graphing? No. What needs to be by itself? Y. All right, so what are we going to move in order for y to be by itself? How are we moving it? We're subtracting it. Now, are we able to combine 1/4 x minus 1? No. So which term do we bring down first? The x. Do you remember in chapter 1 when we did literal equations and I told you when you get y by itself, put the x term first? I was preparing you for this right here. 3.5. All right, I knew what was coming. So we bring the x term down first. That way it is in the correct form. Now let's identify. What's our b? Okay, -1 is our b, and what is our m? 1/4. And it's already got a rise over a run, so we're in good shape. What do we plot first? All right, -1, our b or our y-intercept. From the center, where do I go?
Up 1.
Careful. It's a -1, so we go down to -1. And the coordinates would be? 0, -1. All right. The rise over the run. Michaela Johnson, where do I rise and where do I run this time? Move up 1, and then where do I run? To the what direction? To the right. How many? Okay. I don't want you to hesitate. Why is it to the right? What kind of 4 is that? Positive. So right is a positive direction. So we move up 1 and then we move right 4 and we plot that point. And the coordinates of that would be 4, 0. Now, go ahead and move your pencil. If I move my pencil up 1 and right 4, where is it going to take me for that third point? Off the graph, okay? So, if following the slope takes you off the graph, don't worry about a third point, all right? I don't want to take you off the graph and make things difficult. So in this instance, we would just go ahead and draw a line through the 2 points that we have. All right, so we'll draw a line through those 2 points. We'll put the arrows on the end and we'll call it a day. Let's look at the bottom of this page. It says identify the slope and the y-intercept for each. So when you look at letter A, what do you notice right off the bat about this equation? It's not in slope-intercept form. It's actually in what form? Standard. The x and the y are on one side. Okay, a little out of order, but still x and y are on one side. So, literal equation. We've got to get what by itself in order for us to be able to identify the slope and the y-intercept. Y equals mx plus b. So we need y by itself. So what are we going to move to get y by itself? How do we move the 2x to the other side? It's a -2x, so we are going to add 2x. Awesome. Are we able to combine 8 and 2x? No. So which one are we going to bring down first? 2x plus 8. Again, this just puts it in the right form. But we're not done because y is still not by itself, so what do? I'm going to divide everything by 4. Make sure you divide everything. So y equals, what happens to 2/4? It becomes 1/2, and then we can drop the x down beside the fraction. And what is 8 divided by 4? 2. Now, circle, don't box. You're going to hear me say that a lot this year. We're not boxing this because this is not our final answer. But this is very important information to help us get our answer. All right? Because look at the directions. Find the slope and the y-intercept. So, we are going to identify m, and we're going to identify b. Now that it's in the correct form, what is the m or the slope? 1/2. And what is the b or the y-intercept? There you go. That's the answer you want to box in. Now look at letter B. Is this in the correct form? Nope. We need what by itself? Y. How are we going to get y by itself? We're going to add x to both sides. Can we combine 7 and x? What do we bring down first? X plus 7 equals y. Now, we're back to equations. We want the y first, so we're just going to rewrite it and switch the sides. So we're going to make it y equals x plus 7. We can do that because it's an equation. Circle, don't box. And then m equals and b equals. What is the slope of this line? Awesome. There's an understood 1 right there. I'm so proud of you guys. So your m is 1, and what's your b or your y-intercept? 7. Awesome. Now look at letter C. This is a table of x and y's. This is a x and y chart, if you will. Here's what I want to ask you though. We need the slope and we need the y-intercept. Again, we need an equation in the form y equals mx plus b in order for us to be able to identify the m and the b. Okay? So, do you see an ordered pair on this chart that would represent the y-intercept? 0, 1. Do you see that? Remember what we learned yesterday? When x is 0, we find the y-intercept. So we're looking for an ordered pair that has an x coordinate of 0. Guys, that would make my b equal what? A 1. So let's just plug it in. And y equals, and x can already be brought down. Now, we need the slope. And this time we don't have a graph, so we can't connect points. So instead, we were given a slope formula. Who remembers or can look back and tell us the slope formula?
M equals y minus that one?
Yep.
Oh, y minus y over 6 minus 2. I mean x minus
Okay, so the formula is m equals y minus y over x minus x. Now, we've got to pull 2 points off of the table. All right, these are ordered pairs. So, Kayla, which 2 ordered pairs, which 2 points would you like to use to find the slope?
I would like to use -2 and 5
Okay.
and 2 and -3.
All right, she went wild and she didn't use the one that has a 0 in it. That's cool. We can do that. Now, if somebody else in the class wants to do -2, 5 and 0, 1, go ahead. Let's see if we get the same answer no matter what 2 points we use. Now, Kayla, it's up to you what order you want to do the y's. So tell me, for y minus y, what would you like to do?
I want to do 5
Okay, minus -3. All right, now the y's don't matter, but the x's do. Since you started with the 5, you have to go back to that ordered pair and use its x first. So what is x minus x going to be?
Oh, -2 minus 2.
There you go. Do you see? This is what I was talking about earlier. So for you visual learners, here it is. She did 5 minus -3. That's fine. She can do whatever y minus y she wants. But she's got to be careful for the x's. Because if she does 5 minus -3, she has to go back and use the x from the same ordered pair first. So now we do the math. What do you have right here? 5 minus -3, what do you see?
A double
Double negative, which becomes a positive, okay? What is 5 plus 3?
8.
8 over, what's -2 minus 2?
-4.
-4. And what does 8 divided by -4?
-2.
-2. So, m equals what? -2. And b equals what? 1. So there is your final answer. Okay? Now, this, just so you know, this is extra. For this problem, you wouldn't necessarily have to write the equation. All right? You could identify the b right off the chart. You could have used the slope formula. But I'm just trying to get you to see where the m goes and where the b goes. All right? Now look at letter D. This is one other version. It says the line that passes through. Okay, they want the slope and the y-intercept of the graph, or the line that passes through 3, 3, and 0, 2. Once again, we're trying to decide, is there a y-intercept given to us? So is the y-intercept given to us? We're hesitating. Are we unsure? Okay, listen. If we have the y-intercept, it means the x-coordinate is 0. Does one of those points... So, if one of your ordered pairs has an x-coordinate of 0, have you been given the y-intercept? Yes. Remember, yesterday when we found the y-intercept, we kept making x equal 0. So, if one of your ordered pairs has an x-coordinate of 0, you have been given the y-intercept. So, what is the y-intercept for the letter D? 2. So, b equals 2. Okay? 0 is the x-coordinate. We want the y-intercept. So 2 is the b. Now, we're going to use the formula, m equals y minus y over x minus x. Okay? Michaela, Markham, what do you want to do for y minus y? It doesn't matter. You can do whichever y minus y you want. Okay? So, tell me exactly what to write down.
M equals 3 minus 2.
3 minus 2 over?
Over 3 minus 0.
Good. What is 3 minus 2?
3 minus 2, 1.
And 3 minus 0?
3.
So what, everyone, does that make my m equal? 1/3. Box it in, and that is lesson 3.5.